This is a relay project.
Real Talk starts right now. Here's Ryan Jesperson.
Welcome you to a special edition of the show. This is one that's going to move fast, Real Talkers. We got Federal Jobs Minister Randy Boissonnault in studio coming up in 30 seconds. We got Charles Adler as Passover kicks off, rabbis around the world noting that this one's a little bit different, telling people of the Jewish faith, Jewish backgrounds, quite frankly, in a lot of circumstances, just to stay home. We'll get Chuck's take on that. And it's Earth Day today. Dr. Srijak Bhatnagar is going to join us from Athabasca University doing amazing research in microplastics. Johnny, I'm a little bit nervous that microplastics are one of those things that when you learn about them, you get excited that smart people around the world are working to reduce our ecological footprint, but we also realize how screwed we are. We also realize the amount of damage that we've done to the planet.
That floating garbage patch, I think about it every day.
It's the floating garbage, and it's the one that they say, the plastic island the size of Texas.
We're going to be living on it one day.
But the microplastics, these are the ones that get into the rivers and the streams and the gills of the fish that we eat
water.
And all these types of things. And we don't think about it when we're brushing our teeth, as you're brushing your teeth right now, listening to Real Talk going, thanks for ruining it for us. But it's Earth Day, so we're going to find the positive angle on this, all coming up in the next hour or so, plus positive reflections presented by our friends at Kubi Renewable Energy. Minister Boissonnault, right after we remind you that if you're stuck in a dead-end career right now, you're on your way into a job that you can't even stand, you don't like working for your boss, and they're sure not giving you the opportunities that you deserve. A career in real estate could be a perfect fit for you. And if that is the case, if you've been seeing people in this job, hustling, making their own way, no income ceiling, helping folks find or sell the perfect home, you may be interested to know that Rello is Alberta's, without question, top online real estate school. It's for the bold, it's for the ambitious, and they're going to help you find the next level no matter where you are in your career. They've got a team of dedicated instructors. All the learning is online, so it works on your schedule no matter what. They'll help you to write that real estate exam, get your license, and then the help doesn't stop there. They're going to continue to consult with you to make sure that when you launch your new career, you do it successfully. Best part about hearing about it on Real Talk, 20% off any Rello course with the promo code Real Talk. That's all one word, Real Talk. When you check out their website, that's rello.ca. The Honorable Randy Boissonnault is the Federal Minister of Employment. What's the third one? No, the first, it's workforce development and official languages. Yep. I always just call you the Jobs Minister.
Perfect.
Welcome to the Real Talk studio. You're here
Thanks,
in town. You're in Alberta, obviously an Alberta-based Liberal MP. There's not a lot of you guys. So when you're back in the province, chambers of commerce in particular, and people representing business owners, business managers want to hear from you. You spoke to the Calgary Chamber. You're here talking to us a couple of hours before you'll speak to the Edmonton Chamber as well. What's your general message to the entrepreneurs, the hustlers out there?
So the message is that this budget is about building up Alberta, building up the country. And to any, Gen Z or millennials out there, I want them to know that this budget is about them. And it's about fairness for every generation. And I'll get into it, whether it's housing, whether it's making sure that if you're renting and paying your rent on time, you're going to get credit for that. Ryan, can you believe we've got 7 million Canadians with no credit score? Think about that. And how do you get a credit score unless you actually have found a way to get your down payment to pay your mortgage on time? Or you've got a credit card, right? So we're going to say no. We're going to take the lead. No country's done this before. We're going to figure it out with the financial sector, with fintechs, and with the banks. And so if you're paying your rent, you're a university student, you're getting a trade right now, you're paying your rent on time, like my 22-year-old nephew, he's going to be able to start building his credit score right away.
We've heard the familiar refrain from the Conservatives, from Pierre Poilievre, who's basically describing, in his words, this NDP Liberal government. We were focusing on that last week, the wording and the themes that the opposition is developing, but this NDP Liberal government just tax and spend, tax and spend. What do you say to the people, including, I'm sure, a lot of business people that are paying very close attention to their own bottom lines, going, this government just keeps throwing billions of dollars at problems that it's created?
So I think I can tell you what the message is. Confident countries invest in themselves. And if you take a look at what we're doing in terms of building up our renewable sector, so whether it's hydrogen, Alberta can be the capital of this country for hydrogen. And we've got 7,000 people coming to our city this week to prove that point with the big hydrogen conference.
Canadian Hydrogen Convention.
Yeah, it's a big deal. We've got ministers coming. We've got heads of state coming. I mean, they're coming for hydrogen. They might be coming for the Oilers too. But the reality is like we have put ourselves on the map as a province and as a city, and people are looking to Canada for how do we actually filter, how do we actually weave hydrogen into the solution to actually get to net zero. And I can tell you the smartest workers in the country are right here in Alberta. And look, I get up every day and like, how do I find common ground with the provincial government on the hydrogen file? This is one of the places where we actually get along and get a lot of work done together.
On April 5th, people can check this out. We featured a hydrogen roundtable here on the show. Pretty interesting stuff, as a matter of fact. I didn't know a lot about hydrogen, full disclosure, before we hosted this. And you obviously know there's a community under construction called Bremner, I guess about a half hour east of Edmonton, that ultimately will become Canada's, they expect, 100% hydrogen-fueled community. They expect 90,000 people to live there. Pretty interesting response on that roundtable that saw a ton of engagement, a lot of downloads. People are clearly interested in it. Some people are bullish on it, think it's absolutely an amazing idea. And on the flip side, probably the loudest criticism we heard from people was saying, well, you're using natural gas to get the hydrogen. It doesn't seem like it's as sustainable as it's being portrayed. We see this word greenwashing a lot. What's your take on the actual truth around and the future of hydrogen?
So if you asked me, do I want to see electricity or vehicles powered on a heavy emitting fuel versus natural gas turned into hydrogen, I'm going to pick the hydrogen every day. And in this part of the world, we're not talking about necessarily getting to the retail level. Like, do I expect to have a hydrogen car like Jonathan Wilkinson does in Vancouver? Maybe. But I do see entire fleets, like bus fleets. I see trucking fleets. I see heavy duty fleets converted over to dual use. So they can be on hydrogen or they can be on diesel. That saves a whole bunch of emissions. And it also shows that the technology works. And you want to talk about people and amazing jobs in our province and in our city, heading down this hydrogen path really matters. And look, it's like a way station. Like, we're going to see how the technology gets better. We got off coal. Think about that. We got off coal a lot sooner than we thought we would. Electricity grid didn't crash. In fact, we've got more electricity than we ever had before.
Yeah.
Well, we have had some brownouts.
Yeah.
And that's why Danielle Smith deciding no renewables for 6 months was a devastating move. We've got to have stability and predictability in the sector. And what's in this budget, so let's pivot to the budget now, my friend. We've got tax credits in this budget for clean hydrogen, and we're going to double down on the tax credits that we had before. Carbon capture, use, and storage is a huge deal here in Alberta. Like, we're going to have the world's first net zero cement plant right here in Edmonton. We've got Air Products that's going to have the first net zero hydrogen plant right here in our city. And Dow, we put some money into Dow out in the heartland. That's 7,000 person years of work. That is a huge deal. It's a polyethylene net zero plant that's also going to scrub 2 megatons out of the atmosphere.
This the Dow deal is a big one. It's worth about $10 billion, if I remember correctly, off the top of my head.
Absolutely.
People can Google it and check it out. Listen, hey, Real Talk, Pathways Alliance is advertising on this show. I think that I don't know, for whatever reason, I just think based on some of the feedback we get from people, it would mean more to some of our critics to hear a Liberal cabinet minister comment on carbon capture than it would a Conservative MP. You know what I mean? Well, like people are just imply to us that it's like it's a partisan thing. Like, Conservatives are going to be for carbon capture. You know, people on the left are the people that care for the environment, which I don't necessarily think is 100% true. I don't think that it's black and white like that. But I'm getting this recurring theme in emails from people that think that carbon capture is not a real thing. And then I hear folks like you imply that it has or could have a huge role in Alberta's economic future and have international implications. So, like, what are the straight goods from the federal job minister?
It's remarkable technology. It works. We've got an entire CCUS pipeline in this province. So that's another example of how we partner with the province. Look, we've got to use every tool in our arsenal to actually reduce emissions. It's there's no silver bullet. There's no magic solution here. Not only am I pro CCS, I was pro TMX and still am. And we're going to see TMX come online this year. And for the first time in our lifetimes, Ryan, we're going to get world price for oil here in Alberta. No more haircut from the Americans. That's good for the province's coffers. It's good for the federal coffers. But you know who else it's good for? Workers in the oil and gas sector.
So how does this work? Is it an uncomfortable relationship with you and your cabinet colleague, the environment minister, Stephen Guilbeault, who's not exactly like stoked about expanding new pipelines?
Not at all. Like, this is what being a member of the Liberal Party means. Like, we got not diametrically opposed, but some, pretty far apart positions sometimes, and we find the middle ground. And that's what I think we have as a country. Like sometimes we have opposing views, but we hash it out and we figure out, the right line. And I can tell you, when I put the money on the table and said, look, where else could we actually possibly get world price from oil unless we get another customer? That's why we bought the pipeline. And we're going to divest. Like, Government of Canada is not going to be the long-term owner of this thing. You're going to see Indigenous participation in that ownership structure. And those conversations are happening right now. But I can tell you, when TMX turns on, it's a good news story for business and for workers.
Yeah. Are you involved in the sale of that? People are curious for an update. It's kind of funny because some people are like, well, the federal government never should have invested in it. Others, I think, begrudgingly acknowledge that the project probably wouldn't have happened if the feds hadn't invested in it. Yep. And then now people are concerned that, to shorten it and be concise in the argument, taxpayers are going to get screwed because the government's going to divest itself of its ownership at the time when it's not right to sell. So in other words, I guess some people who didn't want the government to buy it now want the government to hold it. Do you have an update on where that sale's at? And
the
what
conversations are ongoing.
at the table?
So, look, here's my cue. If there weren't so many people interested in it, I would have said the asset had lost value. But my sense is that the asset remains very valuable. The contracts are there. The tripling of the pipeline is going to be full. And so that tells me that the asset is going to have value. Let's see what the final number is.
Okay. I want to ask you, we talked, and we do have an ask-in with Alberta's job minister as well. I wanted to talk to both of you at the
Matt
provincial.
Jones,
Minister Jones' office has heard from us. We're hoping to hear back regarding a specific date. This is me applying gentle pressure there. But I got the federal minister here, and I want to ask you about temporary foreign workers because there have been a couple of changes. It's come up on the show. Everyone has their own frames of reference. And I was talking to a couple of buddies casually who are business owners who utilize temporary foreign worker, the program, quite frankly, to allow their business to function. Without it, they could not. I'm not identifying the businesses because the comments are off the record. But we were talking about it on the show, and I'm not an employer in that context. And it's possible that I have not heard every perspective on every issue. And I was a little bit taken aback by the very fair feedback. And I love this audience because they're engaged and educated. But this audience is coming at me and just basically saying, you're shilling for big employers. The temporary foreign worker program, basically drives Canadians' wages down. It allows employers to undercut Canada's job market. It's diluting the skilled trades. And these are the criticisms. I could read all the praise, but that's not what we care about here. So take us into the changes. They are significant. You've cut off access to temporary foreign workers by approximately 30% for businesses that were utilizing them, right, as a start.
Absolutely.
Okay. So what prompted that?
So let's take a step back because you have a smart audience.
Yeah,
okay?
they
If you take the temporary foreign worker program, there's 5 components to it. There's global talent stream, which is about 5%. There's the temporary ag stream, which is about 25%.
But that's huge in Alberta.
Well, the temporary ag sector, the seasonal ag workers, exists, but it's more British Columbia, Ontario, Quebec. Okay. We've got a permanent residency stream. We've got a high wage stream and a low wage stream. Where the arguments are is in that low wage stream piece. So what am I talking about? This is where, think of
Tim Hortons.
It could be that. It could be food and beverage. It could be an inn. It could be the only rural inn in one of our small communities. And they have advertised in their community for a year, Ryan, for a whole year. And no Canadian wanted the job. So what have I done? I've said, okay, we've now got a changing market since we came out of the pandemic. We've got only 600,000 vacancies instead of 1 million. We've got 1.2 million Canadians wanting to get to work. So I said, okay, we're going to go from 30% of your workforce can come from temporary workers down to 20%. I also reduced the amount of time for which the labor market impact assessment is valid. And we also cut in half the amount of time that you can actually spend here. We're waiting to see how that lands. There are some other issues that I'd like to tighten up, but here's the bottom line. Temporary foreign workers should be a last resort. And you've got to treat workers well. And I said this before, and I'll say it here on Alberta soil, that there's a new sheriff in town. And if you're not treating your workers well, I'm going to find you, I'm going to fine you. And if you don't do a good job, I'm going to pull your permit. And that's a coast to coast to coast. So there's a fine balance here. I'm also scoping in asylum seekers and newcomers. So you've got to do a really good job of making sure that no Canadian wants your job before you can actually get that temporary foreign worker to come here.
I'm not saying that we shouldn't protect workers, okay? So
exactly.
I'm sure you're going to be intrigued by a statement that starts with that. But do you take pause when you look back at the last time that somebody said there's a new sheriff in town, and if you're mistreating workers, I'm going to find you and I'm going to fine you, and it was Rachel Notley and it was Bill 6 and it blew up in her face, and it was arguably probably the biggest political challenge of her entire tenure as Alberta Premier. Like, how does that resonate with you?
We have to protect workers. And I don't want anybody mistreated that's coming to this country, whether it's to pick blueberries or process fish or cut meat or work in our food and beverage sector. You got to treat workers well. And you know who else wants me to do this? The really good employers.
Sure.
Because if they know that they're treating people well, it actually floats the boats for everybody.
Okay, so when you say you're going to look at all these changes and you're going to see how they land, if that means for an employer, these changes mean that their revenue drops 15% and they have jobs that can't get done because they can't find the workers, yada, yada, yada. Ultimately, who pays the price is the business, right? So what's the government's commitment then if you say, hey, this isn't working, then what?
So you talked about Matt Jones. There's some things we can do at the provincial level to make sure that if people want these workers in, provinces can scope in these jobs into, for example, the provincial nominee program, or make sure that they become part of the provincial immigration stream. So there are solutions here. And at the end of the day, the other thing that we have to do, Ryan, because we can have a whole segment on productivity, it's part of a focus of this budget, is we also have to make sure that our businesses are automating and making sure that they're being as efficient as possible. And we got to make sure that they're paying people a good wage. Like, you got to have a living wage if you're going to be working in our businesses in Alberta and across the country.
Okay. Are you talking to Alberta's Premier while you're here, or like when you're back home, are you talking to ministers? I'm curious to know what the vibe is around Bill 18. I think most people know it as the Provincial Priorities Act, or
right.
the Stay Out of My Backyard Act, I think is what Alberta's Premier called it, where they basically say all federal funding for pretty much anything has to pass a provincial purity test, basically. And if it doesn't align with Alberta's values, the Premier says they'll go to court. Pretty interesting news over the past few days where Danielle Smith has said that they're looking at setting up maybe a provincially administered and provincially funded research agency to ensure that research is being conducted that may have Alberta's best interests in mind. I know that a lot of people are very curious to see what that means and what the implications would be. What's on your mind in the context of Bill 18? How will this impact the federal government's relationship with the provinces? And ultimately, what does it mean for your fellow Albertans?
When I met with the Premier in September, we had this conversation about, it wasn't a law yet, it was just an idea. And I said, look, I deal with this law in Quebec all the time. They've had one in the book since the 70s. They beefed it up into the 2000s. I am dealing, Ryan, with deals and agreements right now that were started under a previous minister in my chair, that because Quebec didn't like it, didn't want it, the money didn't flow and stayed in Ottawa. So 2 or 3 years later, the money's either staying in Ottawa or a fraction of it's actually going to the province. And for a government of Alberta that has a minister that has red tape reduction in his title, this is going to tie up municipalities in a whole bunch of red tape. And I can tell you who it's going to disadvantage. It's going to disadvantage smaller municipalities that don't have the ability to advocate and work the system. It's going to disadvantage parts of the province that don't vote, UCP, and you know which city that is. That's our city. So it's going to create a whole bunch more bureaucracy. And look, any minister in the government of Alberta can call me. The Premier can call me. We've had meetings about this. It's a bad idea. I think she's playing to her base. And it's, I called it bonkers, and I'll say it again. It's a bad idea that's just going to slow things down. My job as the federal minister for Alberta is to go and get as much cash from Ottawa as possible and make sure it lands here in our city. And I've done billions of that on my watch. I have a big concern for the university system, for the tech system, for the apprenticeship system, for our municipalities. It's just a bad idea.
People can check out our Real Talk Roundtable last week. As a matter of fact, we brought in 3 people just in particular just to talk about the post-secondary implications of this. The episode that you're looking for on our YouTube or podcast archives, what the UCP's Bill 18 means for Alberta universities. Encourage people to check it out just last week. Randy Boissonnault, our guest. Before we go, I got to ask you about this. I don't know if you'll appreciate the question or not, but I'm in this political group chat. And there was a photo being shared in our group chat, and I'm pretty sure we're not going to put it on the screen because I'm pretty sure it's your house. And correct me if I'm wrong, but there's been a car parked outside your house now for days and days and days, covered in flags, covered in signs, axe the tax. I'm not sure if are they honking. Can you confirm or deny this is your house? I'm curious to know.
It's very near my house, and my message is, if you want to have a conversation about the price on pollution, come and talk to me. My office is
not at your house.
I'm not the only one that lives in the house, Ryan, and I'm not the only one that lives in the block. It's not fair. And you can have a civil discourse in this country, and you can cross a line, and I think the line's crossed.
Okay, so how long has this car been parked outside your house?
At least a week.
And have they stepped foot onto your property as far as you know?
Not that I know.
Okay. Is this something that warrants the attention of the Edmonton Police, the RCMP, Protective Detail?
All authorities have been informed.
Okay. Anything else you want to add to this matter?
Look, we can have civil discourse in our city and in our country. We don't need intimidation tactics. We don't need to use gimmicks. Come and talk to me.
Does it intimidate you?
It doesn't intimidate me, but I haven't had a chance because I just got back last night to talk to all of my neighbors. But if it's in a chat group that you knew about, that I didn't know about, then people are saying, hey, this doesn't sound right.
Well, that's what I'm saying. And I'm saying, like, I have my critics, maybe not as many as you do. It's a compliment or a blast. I don't know. Take it however it lands. But I know how I would feel if somebody parked outside my house for days or weeks on end.
Yeah, and look, I can tell you, like, if you want to have a conversation, I can show the driver of the car and their friends the data. Even in the middle of a pandemic, Ryan, when I was doing doors, you know what our neighbors said they wanted me to work the most on? Fight climate change. Make sure there's a planet here for my kids and grandkids. And so even Scott Moe, when he was with the MPs last week or a couple of weeks ago, said that the system we have, even though he doesn't like it, is the cheapest. It's the least expensive one. He's just playing games. Even Danielle Smith did the math and said that the price on pollution and the rebate gives her family more money than she puts into it. So we can have adult conversations about this and people can blow off steam. But we also have to make sure that, our neighborhoods are safe.
Okay. I'm going to be talking to Charles Adler in just a second.
Sure.
He's in the bullpen waiting to debrief on everything you've just said. And then I'm going to talk to a brilliant researcher out of Athabasca University about microplastics, like you heard. It's Earth Day today. Just in closing, take this wherever you want. What's one thing on your mind on Earth Day? What's one thing you're thinking about?
The forest fire season that's coming up.
Yeah.
We got 100 fires burning already, 60 underground. And we got to be ready for at least as much as we had last year, if not more. And so if there is a reason why we got to double down on fighting climate change and getting to net zero, it's the smoke in the air last May long weekend and last September long weekend. I couldn't go out. Like 11 plus, I can't be outside with what should be seasonal asthma, not smoke asthma, right? And so I'm confident, I'm hopeful, but we're seeing the signs, Ryan. We're seeing the signs of what the scientists told us 10, 15, 20 years ago. We're living it now. And so the more we do now, the better off our kids will be.
Okay. Federal Jobs Minister Randy Boissonnault will be addressing Edmonton's Chamber of Commerce right after talking to us, so we got to let you go. Thanks for this.
Thanks, Ryan.
We talked about Pathways Alliance. You can check that out online. Carbon capture and storage is the goal there. That's the whole plan. Pathwaysalliance.ca, working with governments, including Minister Boissonnault and the federal Liberals, plus the provinces, on proposed carbon capture and storage networks for Canada's oil sands. Global energy the demands are changing. You know that. And we talk about it all the time, and that's why Canada's 6 largest oil sands companies are working together to offer the world responsibly produced oil. Pathways Alliance is planning on building a large-scale carbon capture and storage network that will reduce emissions from operations, protect existing jobs, and create new ones. Responsibly produced energy is what the world wants, and Pathways Alliance knows it is what Alberta can provide. You can learn more about the project by checking out pathwaysalliance.ca. Have you had enough of the disorganization in your space? Have you had enough of laundry just being piled up after it's washed, dried, and folded just because, well, there's just nowhere for it to go? Your closet's jam-packed. You haven't even seen your spring jackets. You don't know where you're going to store your winter coats. And you got company coming next weekend. And what, are you going to go get a blow-up mattress and put them in the boot room? I mean, what's the plan? California Closets has custom closet storage solutions, including Murphy beds, built-ins, entertainment center, and then all the tiny details that'll take your project to the next level. Wait till you see what they can do with well-designed integrated custom lighting. We've worked with California Closets. We loved the experience. The craftsmanship second to none. You can request a free consultation today by checking out californiaclosets.ca. Hey, do you have the 1st of May circled on your calendar? That's the next time that you'll be able to take 15% off grocery purchases of $75 or more at Friesen Brothers, any of their 17 locations across the province, including that beautiful new store, Friesen Brothers Glenora, just off the 142nd Street traffic circle in Edmonton. Do you have a plan for Mother's Day? They're doing these custom charcuterie boxes, absolutely beautiful. Celebrate Mom with a charcuterie box from Catering by Friesen Brothers. Convenience never looked so delicious, and you can totally customize it. Johnny, I saw an interesting poll online. Now, I'm maybe asking you plant-based, your answer will be a little bit different.
Sure.
But the question was, when you're putting together a custom charcuterie box, do you want to go more meat or do you want to go more cheese? Now, if you are entertaining, what do you think?
I think always you want more of the other stuff, the olives, the cheese.
Ooh, the pickled veg,
the
maybe.
mustards, all that stuff. The meat is just kind of, I know most people out there are going to disagree with me.
No, you
I
know
like
what?
the extras. I like the add-ons,
You
right?
want to know what the ultimate, and this poll was conducted on my wife Carrie's Instagram. You want to know what the end result was?
Sure.
70% of respondents believe
There you go.
charcuterie should have more cheese than meat.
You pile up the extras and then you put one piece of meat on top.
But you can't have the lousy meat. You got to every piece of meat in a charcuterie box has got to be perfect. They're so easy to order and pick up. You can learn more by checking out cateringbyfriesen.com. Charles Adler, Emmy Award-winning talk radio legend, a good friend of this show, joining us the first episode of every week. And sometimes we have a real plan, and sometimes when we're getting ready to welcome Chuck, I just say, pal, why don't you just tune in and give us your take on what you're hearing? So a happy Monday to you.
Happy Monday to you, Ryan. Can we talk about the
charcuterie? Sure.
Issues?
Charcuterie? Yeah, we could talk about charcuterie.
We could talk about that too, but I would love to talk with you about the public safety issue with respect to Randy Boissonnault and the guy parked very close to where he lives and where a number of other people live with all the flags and the axe attacks and what have you. Would you have a problem, as a person who lives in Edmonton, would you have a problem with the Edmonton Police Service knocking on the window of the vehicle with all the flags and axe attacks and all that stuff? Would you have a problem with an Edmonton police officer simply knocking on the window and saying, what's going on, fella? What are you doing here? Would you have a problem with that?
I mean, I would expect that would be the case, and I think that would be the case. Never mind the fact that, and listen, this could be a federal conservative MP. This could be a conservative MLA or the conservative premier. It could be a liberal. It doesn't matter to me. I think that even if it was someone parked in front of a private citizen's house, cops should be there within 48, 72 hours.
Yeah, I mean, I think that some people take this freedom bit and freedom of expression bit to a ridiculous level. Canada is about peace, order, and good government. If you don't have peace and you don't have order, you don't have good government, you don't have a good Canada. I fully expect today an Edmonton police officer to knock on that window and saying, what's up?
Yeah.
What's up, Jack?
And what if he just says, it's a free country, and I'm parking my car here, and you can't tell me there's nothing offensive, there's no death threats, there's no profanity on the car, so beat it.
I would say that's not good enough. You're clearly here to make a political statement and to intimidate a human being and intimidate all of the other human beings in the neighborhood. So I'm just going to ask you nicely to move on. And if the guy doesn't move on, then I would simply ask the Edmonton police officer before he shows up to check out what the laws are. We've got thousands of laws in this country to protect people, to enhance public safety, protect them, protect their families. And there's no way on earth anyone is going to tell me that the Charter of Rights and Freedoms is all about anybody having the right to harass, to stalk, to intimidate an individual because they've got let's call it a political issue.
Yeah, the thing for me that especially jumps out is we don't this seems like an obvious thing to say, but we typically don't want to wait until a tragedy happens, right? We don't want to wait till there's been an incident. We don't want to wait till somebody, I don't want to give anyone any ideas, but starts a fire or, invokes a political or, a physical confrontation, which there is precedent for. And I'm not necessarily saying that this individual is going to do it, but to a certain degree, if your car is covered in flags and signs and you've been parked outside a cabinet minister's house for days and days and days and days and days, there's a few screws loose. That's just a fact. And so, that gives me reason to believe that this may not be the end of it. I'm not forecasting something that's going to happen, but I wouldn't rule it out. And I don't think that we wait and say, if only we would have known, if only there would have been a sign like a person parked outside the house for a week. You know what I mean? Maybe it's a fine line because, we'll also say, and I guess you got to say, like, homes are out of bounds, people's families are out of bounds. But at the same time, what sort of a society do we want? People will say authoritarian. They'll invoke that word if we're going to start clamping down on shutting down and silencing political protests. So I don't know if this is a gray area or not. For me, the biggest detail of this is that they're outside his freaking house.
Yeah, it's not a gray area for me at all. I'm not crazy about Danielle Smith's politics. I would feel exactly the same way if someone was parked outside her house or her business. I'm not big on intimidation. We've got language. We can use language. There are a million ways that we can make statements. We've got X, we've got Facebook, we've got Instagram, we've got Ryan Jesperson's wonderful podcast. We've got a million ways of expressing ourselves. Getting in people's grills and intimidating them is exactly what authoritarian societies do. And when democratic societies allow too much of this kind of stuff, authoritarians end up winning because people say, you know what, this democracy thing isn't quite working out. We need a strong man or a strong woman. I don't want to make it a generic thing. But we need a strong person in charge, a stronger government in charge, and we need to really clamp down. So before we get to that stage, I just think that we ought to exercise some common sense.
Yeah, on the live chat here, YouTube live chat, Bunny Slipper says a car parked for more than 72 consecutive hours is considered abandoned. It's time to tow it. My understanding is that the car is occupied, so that adds an interesting layer to it. Kimberly is quite right in saying Calgary's Mayor Jyoti Gondek had an entire protest outside of her house after she was elected. It was disgusting. Deemed to be the pastor, I would say pastor and smirk, Artur Pavlovsky crowd, no regard for her family or neighbors. The Coots crowd, by the way, found guilty last week. We didn't even mention that on the show. Ben Demon Hunter says, was this Randy's personal home? The answer is yes. That's why we didn't show the photo. Where a protester was parked outside, he says if it's outside his personal home, it should be considered harassment. I 100% agree on that. I heard an interesting update, by the way. Jyoti Gondek joined us on the show a while ago, and I was asking her about the harassment that she's been facing and getting booed at that Flames game. Man, did that ever suck for her. We can get it. You and I talked about that already. Yeah. But she shared with us that she had been out at restaurants and that people had been sending their bills over to her table, to the mayor's table, basically saying, like, you can pay our bills. And I was talking to somebody down in Calgary who's, plugged in at City Hall, and they said she didn't give you the half of that story. They said it's been absolutely awful. People, yelling the C word at her in restaurants and in public. Like, it's been absolutely, totally out of control. I see it happening more, not exclusively, but happening more frequently in Western Canada, targeting typically progressive politicians. There's a lot of angst, a lot of anger right now. I always just look at scenarios like this and wonder, like, where's the trajectory going? Like, when do you hit the crest of the hill? How does this wind up? The anger machine is just getting cranked and cranked and cranked. You know what I mean? You can only torque something so far before the bolt snaps,
Canada prides itself on tolerance, but I've got a bit of a perspective on that. I think that when we tolerate everything, when we tolerate people hurling the C word at her and probably some racial epithets, and when we have people harassing Randy Boissonnault and others, I think when we have people engaged in cruelty, I think that what happens at some point is we stop being tolerant. I think that we have to figure out how to be intolerant of that kind of behavior to preserve tolerance. Yes, we've got to clamp down on what some of these jamokes call freedom in order to preserve freedom. Freedom is a precious thing, but freedom is a fragile thing. And that's why people always knock me for being pro-cop, pro-authorities. I need to have the authorities in Alberta and in the rest of Canada guardrails. I need them to be guardrails against harassment, against cruelty. And if someone wants to say, well, that's me being this and that, I'm not going to repeat the names. I get them on Twitter all the time. I'm sorry. I think people who call everybody an authoritarian because they want the law to be enforced and they want the public to be protected, I think they're wrong. Mm-hmm. And I think they're precisely the kinds of people who get masses of people saying yes to authoritarianism.
Travis in our live chat says these people aren't even angry about anything real. If you say that to them, they'll lose their minds, Travis. I'll tell you that much. Plain Power says politicians that invoke fear and anger are the culprits. They should set an example of proper behavior. But here's the deal. They won't, because it's working. It's working. So why would they change it? It's like telling the Broad Street bullies in the 1970s to stop beating people up. They won Stanley Cups with it. Kathy wonders, how on earth did we get to this point where people have the courage to do this? We need to start calling it out when we see it. And then I saw somebody else who said, where was this? This is Doobie Is, who said, you got to point a camera at this person prominently, live stream them, hover a drone above it, video them 24 hours a day, turn the tables. Let me tell you why that's not going to work. They would love it, number one. And number two, you know who would hate that? A drone circling 24 hours a day promoting the fact that there's a protest outside his house? Federal Jobs Minister Randy Boissonnault, who I could tell probably didn't even prefer that we brought the question up in the interview.
I doubt that he wanted that question, but it's your job, and you did a great job by asking the question, because as in this discussion we've discovered, it's not just about Boissonnault, it's about a lot of people. Look, it's difficult to get people to run for office, okay? And one of the reasons it's difficult to run for office is because people do not want to become targeted. And yes, the idea that politically cruelty is working, bad-mouthing is working, lying pathologically and serially is working, that doesn't make it a good. I mean, I'm not trying to be, pristine and self-sanctimonious and all those other, self-righteous things. That's not what I'm trying to do. I'm just trying to be your next-door Canadian Chuck. Some things just don't make sense to me. And the fact that they work politically doesn't make it any more appealing.
Hey, so this, you and I didn't even really plan on talking about this today, but I appreciate you chiming in on it. I just, for me, when politics gets that personal, to me, it ceases to matter what someone's politics are. I mean, unless we're talking about egregious policy, but we look at this and we see example time and time again. It seems like you and I talk about this once a month on how we're chasing decent people away from politics, how people are being bullied out of politics. And Minister Boissonnault, like anybody else, like Mayor Gondek or anybody else that's dealt with this stuff, they'll put on a brave face. And they'll tell you that, I'm not concerned about myself. I'm concerned about my staff, but I'm sure it's in the back of their mind. And ultimately, it just comes down to what do we want our political arena to look like? What do we want the composition of our political parties and our governments and our opposition to look like? And that's something that I hope that I understand that there are certain people on the far right and the far left that are extreme, and nothing you say is going to get through to them. But I do have confidence and faith. It's the entire premise of this show that the majority of people are reasonable and open-minded and, generally speaking, normal, well-adjusted enough to consider these types of questions and to actually take action when they can in their own communities. I mean, the next time you hear somebody make a comment about lynching a politician, regardless of how you feel about it, to maybe, even if it's in a joking way, suggest that they, tap the brakes,
Absolutely. Look, I think most people are normal, but most people who live in a democracy require the authorities to be authorities. They have to be the boss of these laws. They have to enforce these laws. I mean, there's a reason why we have laws. There's a reason why we have regulations. There's a reason why we have people called police officers, firefighters, paramedics, all the way down the line. We have professionals who are protecting us. Who are they protecting us from? Well, oftentimes they're protecting us from people who you say have a screw loose. So this isn't about castigating people who have mental illnesses, but just because someone is unstable doesn't give them the right to step on people. Just because a bully in school may be somewhat unstable and may need some counseling doesn't give that bully the right to stop the class from doing what the class needs to do and to impact on the safety of our kids. That's why we have authorities, whether they're called school principals or cops. And asking the authorities to do their job isn't authoritarian. It's called Canada.
Yeah. Plain Power follows up, says Jespo's right. It is working, but this isn't the type of politics we need to engage in. I 100% agree with you. How about this from Gilles, who says, I had a resident threaten myself and my family with violence when I was in politics. Gilles says they stated my home address. RCMP response was they're just angry. They're not likely to do anything. Gilles says too many get a pass. Justin says I've been saying for a long time that the current political system attracts a specific personality, and it's not the type that I want to vote for. Something's got to give. That from Justin. You can let us know what you think, Real Talkers, to talk at ryanjesperson.com. The email inbox open, obviously, 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. Let me ask you about this, Charles, by the way, Passover, happy Passover. Do I say Chag Samich? Am I pronouncing that okay? I do my best to all of our Jewish friends.
I think it's pronounced Hag Sameach.
Okay,
Just
so
Hag as in Hag, close enough.
This is my Gentile pronunciation of happy festival. I did my best. I shouldn't go laughing into this because a demonstration outside Parliament over the weekend. This was shared by Jamie Kersner Roberts. The video was Daisy Media is who captured the video. Jamie's from the Simon Wiesenthal Center in Canada. You can see the demonstrators outside Parliament, and they're chanting, October 7th means we are almost free. Johnny, can you share my screen? Is it showing up there? October 7th means that we are almost free. Long live October 7th. This, as Passover is kicking off, obviously pretty striking. I don't know the right word to use. To hear that on Canadian soil in the nation's capital, take me into where your head's at on this. I'm assuming you've seen this video.
Yeah, look, we've talked on this show before about anti-Zionism or the government of Israel and whether that's the same as anti-Semitism. And I've criticized the Israeli government. So I've always said that the two aren't the same. You can criticize the Israeli government. You're not anti-Semitic. You can criticize the government of Alberta. God knows I criticize the government of Alberta these days. I love Alberta. I'm not anti-Albertan. I think that this crossed the line, this particular demonstration in Ottawa. This was not just about the government of Benjamin Netanyahu. Criticize it all day long if you like. I'm totally fine with that. This was praising murderers. This was praising rapists. This was praising kidnappers and torturers, praising terror. Praising the terror of October 7th is anti-Semitic, because Hamas will be the first to tell you that their aim is not to have a two-nation state. Their aim is to have a one-nation state governed by Hamas. That would absolutely eliminate the Jewish state. And they also call for the killing of Jews everywhere. That's what this was part of. This was part of worldwide violent anti-Semitism. It doesn't belong on Parliament Hill. It doesn't belong anywhere in Canada. And it, too, is something that the police ought to deal with, and they ought to deal with it immediately. Because like a wildfire, this stuff spreads. And I need to say this. For those people who want to give anti-Semitism a pass because they feel it's a legitimate response to what's going on in Israel, or they don't happen to like Jews or whatever, I'm just saying that beyond this being morally repugnant, it's also practically not smart. Practically. The practical fact is, over the many, many years in many countries, anti-Semitism is the canary in the coal mine. They come for the Jews first because they think that's what's easy, because they think that's what the majority will be kind of okay with. But they never stop with the Jews. It goes on and on and on. It's poisonous. And police in this country, whether they're called Mounties or local police services, have got to help in stopping this wildfire.
Chuck, the Conservative leader, Pierre Poilievre, obviously responding to the budget when asked by reporters about alternative approaches, which is pretty important. If you're going to criticize the carbon tax, what's your alternative? What's your plan for Canada's climate future, climate action, et cetera? They've been asking about his commitment to existing social problems. That was Freudian. Social programs, which are reflecting the deep problems that we have in the country. People are talking about the $10 a day childcare. They're talking about dental care, the somewhat rudimentary plan that was introduced, but is benefiting the lowest income Canadians. That to satiate Jagmeet Singh and the NDP, obviously, not to sound like a cynic, but facts are facts. And then the pharmacare plan, as it's been rolled out now, which for the most part is going to help out diabetics and aid with contraception-related fiscal challenges for people. I think people are looking for a more fulsome plan, but at least the bones are there. The structure is there. Pierre Poilievre, to this point, as reported by John Paul Tasker with the CBC, non-committal on whether or not he would keep childcare, dental care, and pharmacare. I do remember during COVID a couple of years ago, Mr. Poilievre was quite critical of the childcare plan. He's suggesting that the pharmacare plan would ban private plans. The health minister says Poilievre's lying. What do you make of all this? When there is $10 a day childcare in place, when there is dental care for lowest income Canadians, it's a pretty tough rug to pull out if you gain the office of the Prime Minister.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of Pierre Poilievre. Everyone knows that, but I highly doubt that if he were to become Prime Minister, that he would pull the rug out from childcare. I highly doubt that he'd pull the rug out from dental care, and he just might start telling the truth about the pharmacare. I don't even know if you can call it pharmacare. It is for two important items, of course, contraception and diabetes. But for him to, at the moment, try to scare people into supporting him, scare them the way the guy with the truck and the flags and the axe attacks is trying to scare Randy Boissonnault and his neighbors, for Pierre Poilievre to engage in this business of the federal government is trying to take away your private drug plan. There's nothing in the bill about that. He can't defend that. He can throw a bunch of slogans at it. But I just don't understand, Ryan. I mean, help me with this. If you're really 15 to 20 points ahead in the polls, if you're the Prime Minister in waiting, why can't you be a bit more of a statesman and just cut the lying down to size? I mean, it's really unseemly. Everyone knows that the major reason there's change in the wind is because it's been about a decade and people want change. Some are voting for him, for sure, but most are just voting for change. Mm-hmm. But why doesn't he try to just man up and become a better human being and stop with the dime store lying? I'm going to use talk shows as an example. If you're a really weak talk show host, if you have no frickin' personality at all you have is slogans, all you have is fear, well, yeah, you can do this kind of stuff. But Pierre Poilievre is smarter than that. And I'm hoping that Pierre Poilievre is better than that. Scaring people into thinking that the federal government wants to take away your drug plan, that's over the line.
Mm. I do agree with you that I think it's pretty generous to call what exists right now a pharmacare plan. That's a pretty generous assessment of what it is. You know what I love? I love when politicians surprise us. And I would love to see Pierre Poilievre and Canada's Conservatives say, hey, listen, we know a good idea. And I can be critical of lots of policy. I obviously don't think that the federal Liberals are doing anything perfectly. I don't think that all the problems are solved in Canada. Obviously, they're not. But I do love when a politician can say, hey, we know a good idea when we can see it. And we think that empowering families to re-enter the workforce, we think in particular, like statistically speaking, supported childcare, robust programs for childcare allow, typically, statistically speaking, women to get back into the workforce. We believe that as conservatives, what's good for business, what's good for the bottom line, what's good for revenue, what's good for the economy is good for us, is good for the country, and vice versa. So we want to make sure as many people can enter the workforce as possible. We want to kickstart the economy where we can. And we believe, because we've seen the evidence and we've seen the return on that investment, that this is a good program and this program will continue under Canada's Conservatives, and make the necessary tweaks, like optically, to make people believe that your version of it is better or that you're improving on it. But I think like it's a pretty tough scenario. Like we've seen the numbers, we've anecdotal evidence as well, testimony from people, like I said, statistically speaking, typically women, but not exclusively, that say because of this childcare subsidy or because of this program. And people don't care where it comes from. People don't care if it's a deal between Ottawa and the provinces. People, whatever. I remember when Rebecca Schultz, Alberta Minister, got a lot of credit because she kind of held out on Ottawa and got a better plan, it was perceived, for Alberta. Great, perfect, love it. The average person, you think the average single parent or parent that wants to get back into the workforce gives a shit? Like, who's signing the check? They don't care. What they care about is the fact that they can get back to where they wanted to be, get back to where they were, get back to where they were going, not see their career interrupted because the family just can't afford to put the kids in childcare, and so they got to stay home all day. When it comes down to like what real people care about, that's the real talk.
So, Ryan, if Pierre Poilievre continues to look like he's agnostic about childcare and that he won't commit to it, why do you think he does that? Because it got nothing to do with the polls. Why do you think Pierre Poilievre takes that position?
I know what you're trying to get me to say.
I'm not trying to get you to say anything.
I know you're not.
With you.
I know it. I know it's like a guy that puts out like a Black Forest cake and puts a fork right next to it and says, I'm not saying you have to eat it. I mean, you can eat it if you want. I don't know.
Why do you think he takes that position?
Real. I don't want to go on the record and say, but I will just because for our audience members. But, are you trying to lead me? Are you trying to lead me down a path where I talk about people who have traditional family values and believe that certain people have different roles and that certain people should stay? Is that what you're trying to get me to say? I'm simply
saying that.
I know a bear trap when I see it.
Okay, one of the reasons Pierre Poilievre is loved by the officials of the Conservative Party is that Pierre Poilievre knows how to raise money, and Pierre Poilievre almost never says anything that will cost the Canadian Conservative Fund, which is absolutely sacred. It was always sacred to Stephen Harper. It's just as sacred to Pierre Poilievre. And he will never say anything that will cost them money. And they get a lion's share of money in this country from a very small percentage of people. And social conservatives, we can say that social conservatives are a small percentage of Canada. That may be true, but they're huge in terms of how much social conservatives give, traditional conservatives, to the Conservative Party of Canada. And there are many traditional conservatives who don't want to subsidize childcare because they want mom at home with the kids. I'm not here to have an argument about how good it is or not good to mom at home with the kids. Tired of that. I had those discussions 25 years ago. It's old news. So my only point is that Pierre Poilievre continues to cook this hamburger because it brings money in to the Conservative Party of Canada.
Yeah, I just know, and I don't think that this is necessarily like, you can't say this across the board. Maybe we'll hear from some people that'll say to me, well, I'm conservative and I don't feel this way. I just know that like whenever we talk about this, we get emails from people that just say, they just see no value in it. And they, and for a lot of people, it's based on like what their family did 30 years ago or what their family did 40 years ago. Like we made the sacrifice and typically speaking, she stayed home, and I don't believe that now I should pay for you to be able to, pass off. And it's always like in a very like sort of like said in like a real asshole kind of a way. Like, I don't believe that I should pay for you to be able to dump off your kids to somebody else for the day. Like, you know what I mean? That's typically how it's characterized. And I wouldn't be saying this if I hadn't received like 15 years of emails worth of this exact type of comment through the course of my career.
Well, it's the same here, but, we tend in this business to make things as personal as possible so that they're relatable. Otherwise, we're just a bunch of academic policy wonks, and God bless the academic policy wonks, but it's very, very tough listening to them because it's just freaking boring. So I'm not into being boring. You're not into being boring. So how about this? My mother had this really high-end job when I was very young, and so we needed childcare. The high-end job was she was sweeping the floors and washing the floors of bakeries, 3 different bakeries. And the childcare that we had was a neighbor who took care of children for $1 a day. So we had $1 a day childcare. But if we didn't have $1 a day childcare from the lady next door, my mother wouldn't have been able to make $14 a day. So for people who think that, this is some kind of system which is enriching women at the expense of Canadian taxpayers, sorry, that's bullshit.
Charles Adler, Emmy Award-winning talk radio legend, and our guest, the first episode of every week, exclusively right here on Real Talk. We'll see you in 7 days.
You bet.
You can find Chuck online on Twitter at Charles Adler. I know I don't have to invite you to let him know what you think about his appearances here on the show, because I see so many of you already do. And of course, you can make sure that you share this episode. It's nice and easy to do if you're listening on the podcast. Just look for the link. You just click the button, share. You can share with your friends you think might benefit from Chuck's perspective. In 60 seconds or less, we're going to talk to a researcher out of Athabasca University. They're using microbes to eat plastic. And Johnny and I are hoping that the microbes can eat the Texas-sized island, the plastic island floating in the ocean, but we'll find out if that's possible. It's Earth Day. From Dr. Srijak Bhatnagar coming up in just a second. First, I want to let you know that, as Minister Boissonnault pointed out, I hate to put it this way, with enthusiasm in my voice, but wildfire season is upon us. More than 100 burning in Alberta already. It doesn't feel like it right now because our air is not difficult to breathe quite yet, at least not where we're at. But soon that's going to be the case. Entire communities impacted. And it can leave you in the lurch, to say the least, especially if your home or business is affected. That's where Complete Care Restoration comes in. Complete Care Restoration has more than 25 years of experience restoring property and rebuilding peace of mind. They've got certified professionals to do the job. Don't try to do it yourself. Comprehensive mitigation and restoration services. You can find them online, completecarerestoration.ca, or give them a call, 780-454-0776. Athabasca University, Canada's Open University, is offering world-class accredited online degrees and courses. And here's the best part. They're designed so you can complete your education wherever and whenever it works for you. That means if you want to take a step away for some family time, maybe you're looking after your parents, looking after your kids, you're not going to fall behind in your studies. You're dictating the pace of your studies. It's a perfect custom fit. And you can select your own path as well. They're driven at AU by a strong commitment to empower learners worldwide. Your only commute is to your device, so that barrier is removed. They've got different programs and courses, a ton of research going on there. You can read more about it on their website. Heck, they've even got an MBA program. And check this out, news from the hub at athabascau.ca. How microbes can help us protect the environment. Look at that. Hey, why don't we talk to the brilliant researcher behind this project right now? It's Earth Day, everybody. And we wanted to talk to somebody that is doing real work in the real world to address a real problem. And our next guest certainly qualifies. You know that plastic is a real issue, plastic waste in particular, but plastic also something that every single one of us utilizes in our everyday lives. So what is the future of plastic? What does the future of the environment look like with plastic in the mix? Dr. Srijak Bhatnagar is an assistant professor of microbial ecology and computational biology at Athabasca University, also an adjunct professor at the University of Calgary. He's an environmental microbiologist, and his Environics research group studies microbes of polluted environments with an emphasis on cleanup of contaminants. These are the people we need on these problems. Dr. Bhatnagar, welcome to the show, and thanks for making time for us. Happy Earth Day to you.
Happy Earth Day to you as well, Ryan. Thank you for having me on the show today.
Did today feel a little bit different? A guy like you in your area of study, does Earth Day feel a little bit different than the other days?
It's one of those days that I always ponder of where we have come from since the last Earth Day or the last year, and what progress have we made in terms of our impact or reducing our impact on this planet.
And how would you say that we stack up? Do you have feelings of optimism today?
I'm very optimistic about where we are headed, because we are learning about what we are doing to the planet. But not only that, we are also trying to figure out ways, trying to reduce our impact on the planet itself.
Can you talk to us about why don't we, first of all, before we get into what you're doing and what the research is telling you and what the implications will be, talk to us about our plastic problem. Like, globally speaking, what's the reality?
So as you already said, that we all use plastic. If you look around, we are surrounded by plastic in so many different ways and so many different forms. And we use it because they're easy, they're durable, and that's what makes it a bit challenging of how much plastic we are using and producing. So an estimate is I think we are roughly producing over 800 million tons of plastic every year, and only 10% or even less of that is recycled. About another 20% gets burned up for cleanup or energy generation. So we're still left with 70% of the plastic that we produce. And the interesting thing is that most of the plastics produced within this year or within a year gets discarded of production. So that's crazy amount of plastic that we just use within a year, and it lingers around for hundreds of years. And so what does that mean for us in the environment? What does it mean for our animals and the waters on the planet?
Yeah. So what does it mean when we're talking about plastics? First of all, do we need to delineate between plastic and single-use plastics? The reason why I ask it, when we look at like plastic bag bans, for example, this is something that becomes a very real part of someone's life where they're getting charged 15 cents at the store or the grocery store doesn't offer bags anymore. So we're hearing a lot more about single-use plastics. Do we need to have a more specific conversation in your mind?
As far as single-use plastic is concerned, I think the definition is very narrow right now. We are a lot focusing on plastic bag or grocery bag itself, but there can be so many different single-use plastics, especially packaging. Once you open it, you are not going to keep the plastic that your food came in, that your products came in. You're going to discard it. That's also single-use plastic. So as part of reducing the amount of plastic we're using, because the less plastic we use, then the less likely we will create pollution problems. Single-use plastic is definitely an important issue to address because if there are alternate ways of not using that plastic, so for example, there's been a lot of conversation about single-use plastic bans, especially in Calgary, where I've been, where co-op gives out compostable plastics, which is easy to get rid of. So what does the single-use plastic here means? Because we need to be able to look at not just the plastic is single-use, but how easily or how much we can actually clean up the plastic.
Okay, so let's get to that, because this is what you're looking at, right? This is the problem that you and your team are endeavoring to solve.
Yeah, so once a plastic gets into the environment, whether it's a bottle or a plastic bag, it tends to break down. It tends to fall apart. Anyone and everyone has seen just a piece of plastic bag floating around in the air because it is like badly disintegrated, badly fallen apart because of sun, air, water, all the forces of nature. It falls apart. And when it falls apart, it becomes tiny, tiny pieces of plastic called microplastic. And they are everywhere. And that's what my lab and my research group is studying, because these microplastics or these very tiny plastic pieces have been seen and found everywhere from Mount Everest to the deepest depth of the ocean, where we have been able to reach, to even in our bodies, in our lung, in our blood, in our placenta. So these tiny plastic pieces, the microplastics, are everywhere. And that should raise an alarm, and it justifiably raises an alarm. And we are trying to see that what are these microplastics doing? Just because they're everywhere doesn't necessarily mean they're harmful. We know that for water, it's everywhere and it's not harmful in the right context. And the same way, we need to figure out that now that plastic and microplastic is everywhere, what is it doing? And I'm specifically studying microplastic from the angle of bacteria or these invisible microbial life forms that are on it to see two aspects of it. One, we know that bacteria can settle on the plastic and they make a home of the plastic, including these tiny microplastic pieces. And we want to know that are these bacteria disease causing? So are these tiny pieces of microplastic have basically become buses to shuttle around disease causing bacteria that then can enter our bodies or bodies of animals and fishes? Or the second angle that I'm more interested in and I'm looking at is the bacteria that are living on these tiny pieces of plastic. Are they eating the plastic itself? Because if they're eating the plastic, that is a fantastic news for us, because then they are our allies. Then we can work with them, we can use them, we can harness them to actually clean up our own plastic pollution.
Wow. I just want to go, but let me just sort of commend you on your storytelling for you to say to us that we're discovering microplastics on Mount Everest and in placentas, in utero. I mean, that just sort of reiterates that they are literally everywhere, right? Like the minute you tell us that they're up on the International Space Station, then all of a sudden we realize that it's inescapable. And then part of me goes, oh, but you're going, well, it's not necessarily, I mean, and you're probably going to want to qualify what you're saying here. But the way that it lands with me is you're not denying that we have a plastic problem, but you're saying like it's not inherently harmful. Like in other words, we don't need to hit the panic button quite yet. Not to deny that we have a plastic issue, but I find some balance in your assessment here.
Yes, there is a balance in my assessment. Part of the reason is because we know so little about these microplastic pieces. It's only in the last 10 years that we have started looking for these microplastic pieces everywhere, and we have been finding it. Now that we know that they are everywhere, the next step, and that's where we come in, is to start looking at what are they doing? Because unless we know what are they doing, then how do we address the harmful effect they could be causing and bringing? I mean, personally, finding microplastic or anything, I would say, that we use in the placenta, which is, so far removed from the environment, is terrifying. But they are getting there. If they are getting there, what are they doing? Because that's an important question to answer, because unless we know that, we cannot address the microplastics that are in the environment. Yes, we can come up with technologies and ways to reduce the plastic we use, to keep it from getting out into the waters, into the ocean. But it's already out there, and the plastic is around. And as I said, it is going to be around for hundreds of years. So then even if we stop using plastic right now, there's still going to be microplastic around for hundreds of years to come.
And we're not going to
So
stop
what are
using
we
it right
doing?
now, right? Again, we're not going to stop using it right now. But you're 100%
exactly.
correct. We've got the issue that exists at this moment, and we've got the issue that exists moving forward. It seems to me to be like smoking cessation programs with governments. You've got the people that have been smoking for 50 years already that are going to have their own issues, that already have the issues. And then you've got the generation to come where you go, what do we want smoking rates to look like 50 years from now, right? So you got to address both of them. Is it possible for you, and I'm sure you can you dumb down ultimately like the end game? And I know right now you're fact gathering and you're researching with your colleagues at Athabasca University, but ultimately, how could this be addressed? Like, is this like drones hovering over these plastic islands and dropping these things that attach to the microbials that eat the plastic? Like, how does it go? Can we turn it into fish food or something?
So there are two ways that I have so far thought of that we can at least reduce a large amount of microplastic that's getting into our water. The first one is it's leaching from our clothes. A lot of our clothes, especially the quick dye clothes, are made from plastics. When we wash them, a little bit of fiber leaches out every time we wash them. It comes out into the water and then it goes down the drain. So all of those drains are leading into wastewater treatment plants. So that's one place where we could use the microbes to treat the plastic pollution. The second one, and the second biggest source of microplastics, is tires. Every time we drive around, tire debris comes out. Tire is a type of plastic. And so all of that goes down a stormwater drain. So in a city like Calgary, the stormwater drain is also sort of treated minimally, that there are settling ponds around to get rid of particulates from the water before it's getting discharged into the river. And I think that's another place that we can leverage plastic degrading bacteria to start cleaning out our plastic waste. Because remember, a lot of plastic exists in the ocean, but not all of it we took it out to the ocean in the form of fish nets and, water bottles falling off of the boats and ships. It is coming from inland. It is going through our waters. It is going through our rivers. And if we can keep it from getting into the river, or if we could even reduce it from getting into the river, I think that's a huge victory.
Do you have an opinion on the effect? I mean, this may be sort of getting out of your wheelhouse. I don't know, but part of this in addressing this issue would obviously be to reduce our use of plastics, in particular single-use plastics. Do you have an opinion on programs that are effective or not? Do you have an opinion on the efficiencies of our recycling programs across the country? Do you have a jurisdiction you've seen that's doing it particularly well?
I can comment to that as a consumer who is also a plastic researcher from a microbiology perspective. But as a consumer, a lot of onus is put on us to reduce our plastic use and to be a good citizen and sort out our plastic and recycle it. Recycling facilities are not uniformly present across different communities. Larger cities tend to have better recycling facilities than smaller communities. What does that mean in terms of plastic recycling, right? We see a number on the back of the plastic and we see a recycling logo. The logo exists doesn't necessarily mean it's recyclable. That's an important part. Is certain jurisdictions, certain municipalities only process number 1 and number 2, which are like polyethylene versions, because they're easy to recycle. And so there's an aspect to like, there's only so much we can recycle, and only plastic is like a large different types of chemicals, right? Because the plastic that's in my clamshell of tomatoes is not the same as the plastic that's making this computer monitor. So not all plastic is recyclable, right? So as a consumer, I think there also has to be an onus. There also has to be, we believe in choices in Canada and in North America, that as a consumer, I should have a choice. So I should have a choice to buy my cucumber and buy my potatoes not packed individually in plastic bags or wrapped up in plastic. Do I have that choice? So there has to be some top-down approach, some inducement, I believe, from the government to actually steer the packaging industry towards non-plastic and more or compostable and earth-friendly packaging materials.
So the whole idea around microbes, I did like a tiny bit of reading before I talked to you, just so I didn't sound like a complete idiot. But I wanted to bring some sort of like idiot element to this so you could kind of dumb this down to us, and so I can ask these innocent questions, these sort of junior high level questions. But microbes, I was interested to learn and to read. I guess I've kind of underestimated microbes. If somebody would have put me on the spot and said, tell me about them, I probably wouldn't have been able to do much, except to say, I know you can't see them with the naked eye. I know that much, I think. But we're talking penicillin, like bread, beer. This is like microbes are sort of already proving their potential, their capabilities in a way that's obviously got to give you reason for optimism that this could be a pretty significant discovery or a pretty significant technique.
Yes, I can also give more examples that are now being used by an average person. Probiotics, those are all microbes in a pill. And they are helping our digestive system. They're helping our body in terms of getting us nutrients or getting nutrients out of the food or just generally making us healthy. There's a huge aspect of human microbiome, or the microbes that are in and on us, and how they are helping us weather in so many different ways. And so probiotic is another example. Another example I can give you of microbes in action is before studying plastic, I used to study microbes for oil cleanup. So there are, yes, they're invisible. And part of the reason that's why they go underestimated, because they're doing so many different things. Microbes are the real lungs of the planet. Microbes in the ocean fix more carbon dioxide, produce more oxygen than the Amazon rainforest. Microbes are able to do so many different things. The reason we can grow peas and beans without adding any nitrogen fertilizer is because of microbes. these plants tends to bring and shelter the microbes that can take the nitrogen out of the air, so we don't have to supply it as part of our fertilizer. And as I was mentioning, that means these millions of different species of microbes have so many large number of things that they could do that tend to go unnoticed largely. And so I was looking at what microbes can do to oil spills. How can we clean up the oil spills? And from that, the next step was to study plastics, because a lot of plastics are made from petroleum, and that's why they're called petrochemicals.
Buddy, you're figuring out how to clean up oil spills, how to deal with the plastic problem. We got to send you a Superman t-shirt so you can wear it.
Oh, I would say microbes are the one who should get that Superman suit.
Well, sure, but the human brain power behind it, doing this research at AU is pretty remarkable. We brought you here to talk about plastics, but let me pick your brain on oil spills. I mean, it's just such a gut punch. I mean, we know the world, needs oil. We'll see what the world's relationship with oil looks like in 50 years. But like right now, we're still using oil, which means we're transporting it. There's debates across this country and others around pipeline expansion, around using rail, tankers, offshore drilling. We've seen what can happen, disasters there, the BP spill. I mean, you remember that, the underwater did you watch that underwater camera at all? You know the exact one I'm talking about. It was just showing gushing. I would watch it, and then I was just appalled. I had to turn it off. So where are we in I know you're not going to say it's not a problem. It's obviously a huge issue. But like when Lake Wabamun happens and a train derails and dumps into the lake, or an area is polluted, how far ahead are we than like 10 years ago in understanding how we can can you ever get the environment back to where it was?
So that was the biggest question that came out of the Deepwater Horizon. Everyone saw oil gushing out, and scientists rushed to study it. Scientists rushed to clean it up, and microbiologists were also there. And when the Deepwater Horizon spill was cleaned up, we had no idea if the cleanup actually was complete. Did the environment go back to what it was pre-oil spill? And that was a huge part of my work as part of oil spill remediation. And we were specifically focusing in Arctic Ocean, because with thawing sea ice, there's going to be a lot more ship traffic happening through there, which means there will be oil spills. And so we wanted to see what happens in a remote area where we can't respond so quickly to oil spill. And the first step we did was not only look at, are there microbes that could eat oil spill or that could clean up oil spill, but we also decided to look across entire Arctic Ocean of Canada to start establishing what we call microbial baseline. So what that allows is, we know if before any oil spill happened, what the environment looked like in the context of microbes. And so if and when an oil spill happens and gets cleaned up, we have something to compare it back to. So we can say, yes, the oil spill cleanup is finished, and we have been able to bring the environment back.
How far away you might get this question at cocktail parties all the time, but like, how far away are we from solving the plastic problem? Like when I heard that there's this plastic island floating the size of the state of Texas in the ocean, you sit there and you go, like, it just feels like we're all going to have to get on a rocket ship to go live on Mars. It feels like we've just like destroyed this planet. Now I know, and someone once said this to me and it stopped me in my tracks. They said, planet Earth will be fine. Planet Earth will always be fine. Humans on planet Earth may not be fine, right? The planet's always going to be fine. We may not be fine. Can we solve our own problems? And if so, what's the time frame look like? Not to put you on the spot.
I would say that seeing how we are trying to solve our climate change problem, I would say a couple of decades. It needs to be concerted effort. In Canada, we can try to do everything we want, but we share the waters with entire world, right? We share our oceans. When I say waters, I mean oceans with the entire world. So if the plastic is being produced elsewhere, then it would move, it could move to our oceans, even though we may not produce. And again, we talked about we have to use plastics. For example, you can imagine what will happen if doctors and nurses didn't have PPE during COVID. That was made from plastic, right? So, and if we do go to Mars, if we do decide to evacuate the planet, I am fairly certain we'll take some plastic with us just because it's so versatile and durable.
Of course we will. And how will we power our rockets?
Right.
Like these are all,
or, inside the rocket, there will be components made of plastic. All the cables, all the wiring is going to be coated in plastic, right?
Is this, I don't know if this is outside. First of all, I can't tell you how much, I don't always say this. I'm really enjoying talking to you, and our audience is really enjoying this as well. Thank you. You do like a masterful job of taking high level stuff and kind of, what do I say? Making it more accessible. I'm trying not to say dumb it down.
Thank you.
But I really appreciate that. We're talking about carbon capture a little bit on the show. And we're talking about the uses of that carbon. I don't want to get too out of my depth here, but what role do you see for carbon fiber or other carbon-derived, what's the word I'm looking for? Products, other applications of carbon in replacing plastics. I see, for example, like in custom vehicles, in body work, I'm seeing a lot of carbon fiber in like athletic gear, like hockey sticks would be an example. But like there's a million applications, obviously. Can you see byproducts from our oil and gas and energy industries working to lessen our reliance on plastic?
I would need a moment to think about that.
Yeah, it feels like I'm asking you kind of a loaded question.
Yeah, it is a bit of a loaded question, but I should point out that a lot of plastic does come from our oil and gas, especially gas, like ethylene is a gas that becomes polyethylene. In terms of carbon fiber, it comes down to is how we modify it so that it can break down naturally, so that natural forces, which in this case are microbes, it's a lot more accessible to it. It's a lot more palatable to the microbes, so they can actually eat it up. Because, if it's just ethylene, that is the base of plastic, or polyethylene, I should not say plastic, but polyethylene or plastic bag, that's very readily eatable by microbes. But the fact that we string them along and make them into long chains, that makes it a lot less accessible, a lot less palatable to the microbes. So instead of being able to eat it from wherever, they have different ways of trying to slowly eat it. And so in terms of carbon fiber and using it, it will come down to is before we unleash it as a more earth-friendly substitute for plastic, I think we should look at can it be eaten up by microbes? Because what we want is it should be durable, but as I mentioned, most of the plastic is discarded within a year, and we want something durable enough for, say, 5-10 years, whatever the application may be.
Yeah.
And after that, it should just get eaten up.
Yeah, I saw an interesting, I'm not trying to pick on, there's a big pizza chain across the country. They've got restaurants across the country, and they have a new ad campaign out. And it's for the Stanley Cup playoffs. I don't know if you've seen it, but they're pitching an idea. Johnny, have you seen this? You know the big pizza chain I'm talking about?
No.
That started by that former RCMP officer. You know
No.
the one I'm talking about, BP's. And they've got this new ad out, and it's a terrible idea, as a matter of fact, because they're suggesting that because it's been like 30 years since a Canadian team.
Oh, I have seen
Don't worry,
this.
Dr. Batnagar. I'll bring this back. Don't worry. I'll bring it back. But they're suggesting that
we all cheer for
together.
whatever Canadian
we
team
all
makes
cheer
it
for
the
all
farthest.
that's not.
Why not?
Well, number one, go Bruins. I can't wait to see the Leafs lose.
Oh, come on.
Yeah, I'd love to, but I get the idea. But here's the premise of the commercial, Doc, is they're talking about the heartache that hockey fans have experienced in Canada over the years. And so like when the Canucks lost to the Rangers in 94, and how do they show that? They show that by somebody like smashing their TV And then they show, like in 2017, when the Oilers lost, the Connor McDavid led Oilers in the first year in Rogers Place, and then they lost that heartbreaker. I think it was to Nashville. They wanted to go to the Stanley. It didn't work out. and then they show somebody driving and backing over their flat panel TV and crushing the TV. And then they show somebody throwing their radio out of the window and it smashes on the ground. And I mean, I guess it's an effective ad because here we are talking about it for free. But the first time I saw it, before I even knew what the ad was for, number one, I thought about, I'm going to be talking to you. And number two, I thought about, this is our relationship with appliances now. This is our relationship with anything that doesn't work. It's our relation when something, my wife and I'm not proud of it, but we did a cost benefit analysis. We just replaced a 4-year-old dishwasher because it cost us less to put a new one in than to bring a plumber or a repair technician in to fix it. So where does that where does that 4-year-old dishwasher go? To the dump. And I hope that some of it's recycled. I don't know. But you get the idea. Like our entire relationship with not just plastic, but with everything now is like, if it doesn't work, it's gone. And I've got a buddy who has a beer fridge in his garage. It is the coolest. I'm sure he's had to pay to maintain it a little bit. From the 1950s, this fridge. It's probably an absolute hog on its power usage, but it's still working. And everybody knows what I'm talking about. I mean, as consumers here, a bit of the onus, I mean, it's great and it's excellent that we have this technology. There's got to be some government programs in place. There's got to be something to influence, I think, consumer behavior to a certain degree. But a lot of this falls back on us, too.
That is very true. And as you mentioned, that you're just replacing the dishwasher 4-year-old only because it's cheaper to buy. There are two aspects to it that I can think of. One is that where our production is at with mass production and assembly lines, we make things a lot cheaper. And that's where I was saying that there has to be some top-down approach from the government to put the onus or share the onus of recycling with the manufacturer itself and not put it 100% on the user, on the customer, because cost is an important aspect of it. But again, it is designed to be less repairable too, because, that drives the economy and that drives the engine, that drives the GDP growth, is that we can sell more things. So there is a huge movement coming out of mostly electronics for right to repair, because a lot of us were around that we had computer towers that we could just swap parts out and upgrade it on a yearly or whatever basis we want. And now I have a laptop that if something breaks, it's just easier and cheaper for me to just go buy a new one and throw this out.
100%. Yeah. And then we got a good point from Larry, and Larry's right. I mean, there's been a lot of reporting on this. I'll reference CP24's reporting. But Larry says, Canada promised to stop exporting unwanted plastic waste, but it's definitely still happening. He says mountains of plastic, sometimes as tall as single-story buildings, are rotting in the streets in Myanmar. And Larry's not wrong. So, it's like, for us, though, it's out of sight, out of mind, right? Like, if it's not like piling up in our back property, or if it's not piling up in our garage, we kind of don't necessarily think of end stage, or the fact that this water bottle that we just drank on the side of the soccer field is going to end up floating near the Philippines, right? But that's where our heads need to be. Before we thank you for your time, and I feel like you were about to say something. Go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to say that is an important part of recycling is when we calculate that something is recycled, doesn't mean that we just send it to a recycler and then we just believe that check mark and like this amount of plastic is recycled, not knowing how or if it's even recycled, right? So
I had somebody that I promised to preserve their anonymity tell me that within the city of Edmonton tell me that they said people would be so disheartened and outraged if they saw how much of their quote unquote recycling actually winds up in the dump. And there's the obvious stuff, like people that I think mean well or maybe haven't read up enough, and so they're throwing like their pizza boxes in there. Those can't be recycled. But even the stuff that I think people think is being recycled, she told me the majority of it is not.
Yeah, it's called wish cycling, and I used to be guilty of wish cycling because I thought, oh, there's a recycle logo with a number and it's recyclable, until I found out it's not. for many reasons for what the kind of plastic it is, but also think of like takeout containers that are black. The way the plastic is recycling works is the plastic needs to be sorted on different types of plastic, and we all throw all our plastic into one bin. So there is a sorting center somewhere which has a black conveyor belt. And if there is a black piece of plastic on it, the optical sensor may not be able to pick. So a lot of that plastic is going to end up not getting recycled. Again, I know for a fact, I'm not going to say where, but or who, but a lot of our recycling does get contaminated as well for non-recyclable plastic, trash that ends up in the recycling stream, and then it gets diverted directly to landfill because it costs too much to be able to sort it than to actually recycle it. And that's where I think consumers can come in to be aware of what your municipality is able to recycle and only throw that. And when you do that, you will realize how much plastic that we get and buy and or is, for the lack of a better term, get shoved on us, cannot be recycled.
Yeah.
And it's sorting is the reason why a lot of plastic gets sent offshore, because the human cost, the labor cost is a lot lower where someone can manually go and sort it apart. So so there is an aspect to that where I think it's a shared responsibility.
I want to thank you for your time. We've kept you way past what we've asked for, and so I appreciate that. I'd like to wrap with Dwayne's question because it's a good one. We brought you on here to talk about microbes and plastic. We've talked about oil spill cleanups. We've talked about consumer behavior, environmental responsibility, a little bit of political policy. So I appreciate that. But Dwayne's curious to know, how could microbes factor in, or what approach might we take to other pollutants in our watersheds, in our rivers, streams, and oceans? Do the implications of microbes extend beyond oil spill cleanups and plastic cleanups? Like, I guess I don't want to. I guess I'm saying is that could they be a fix-all solution?
So just like plastics, microbes is a huge group of different things.
Right.
And
okay.
so certain microbes will be helpful for certain things or certain pollutants and may not be helpful to certain pollutants. So another example I could give you here that I'm studying with research, working with the Big Stone Cree Nation in northern Alberta, is looking at herbicide spraying in the forest. Mostly because how the forestry industry works is there's a lot of herbicide application that happen, which is to say they go and spray very potent Roundup so that, you could regrow forest. But what the regrowing forest means is you kill the weeds. Many of those weeds are actually traditional indigenous medicine. So if they survive, or in this case, if the Roundup, or I shouldn't say Roundup because it's a trademark, but if the herbicide survives in the soil, can it move up into the plant and then end up in humans? And what does that mean? So I'm approaching it from a microbial angle to study, to see if the microbes can actually break down the herbicide, and if the presence of those microbes could be used as a marker or as a sign that there is Roundup in the soil. So there's another example for you.
I'm picturing the Princess Leia hologram right now. Save us, Three Jack. You're our only hope. Save us.
Again, it's the microbes. It's not me.
Yeah, I like
just
this is what every brilliant researcher does, is deflect the praise, focus the attention on their team and the area of study, and we appreciate that. Hey, let me just point out to our friends that are listening to this or watching on YouTube that they can check out the show notes. We'll link to a feature on you that was just recently published. As a matter of fact, it was published today on Earth Day, how microbes can help us protect the environment, out of the Faculty of Science and Technology at Athabasca University. That's where our guest, Dr. Srijak Bhatnagar, is an assistant professor of microbial ecology and computational biology, also an adjunct professor at the University of Calgary. Happy Earth Day to you. Thank you for providing the appropriate blend of reality check and positivity that we don't always get. Lauren in the chat is wondering, I hate to put you on the spot, but I think I know the answer, if the plants behind you are real or fake.
They are very real.
Yeah.
I love plants and I like to grow plants and whatever, they like we could get. So they are real. Yeah.
Well, don't think that they didn't notice. Don't think the audience didn't notice. I do my best to keep them alive around here as well, but yours look like they're thriving, Doctor. We shouldn't be surprised based on what we've learned about you. Have a happy Earth Day.
Happy Earth Day to you as well, Ryan, and thank you for having me on the show.
Yeah, you got it. Dr. Srijak Bhatnagar.
Jespo,
You feel a little bit better?
Big plant guy.
Oh, you can tell.
If you guys-
I give you permission to tell the truth.
If you guys had a window into our studio,
I love plants.
we have tried our darndest.
We try so hard.
And people come in here and they're like, "What are you doing?" Because there's a couple windows in here, but there's not a lot of light.
If
in
I
this
spent
old
as
building.
much time on
Old
business
buildings-
development as I do on plants,
old buildings weren't developed to have tons of sunlight. So
No.
we put them by the window every weekend.
We trim-
every
we
day
fertilize,
if we can. We
we-
trim, we fertilize, we keep the bugs off them, everything. For some reason,
they're
a
just
soldier falls.
some of them are
every
doing
month.
some of them are doing better than others. But we try our darndest, and I don't. So a friend of ours, a news anchor, came in here for our Real Talk holiday party, and he walks in and he takes a look around. This guy's been in TV studios for 25 years. He goes, "What the hell are you doing?" And I go, "What are you talking about?" He goes, "Real plants." He
He's
goes,
like, "That's crazy."
He goes, "That's crazy. Nobody puts real plants on a TV studio, on a TV set, because they're hard to take care of, and because when they look different, when they start to wither, then you got a real problem. You need consistency on set." And I said, "Nah, but it's Real Talk. Real Talk's got real plants."
Yeah, it's true.
And so there you go. But we've added a few. I don't like the word fake. What's the word? Synthetic? No, I guess fake. It is what it is. We've
fake.
added a few fakes, but the ones you're seeing, for example, right here, that's real.
Yeah.
I think we got some real ones in here.
There's some real ones. You can't see them.
Everybody says you can see
back
behind you.
me,
They're
yeah.
real, and they're real and they're fabulous. Isn't that the phrase? They're
No,
real
and they're spectacular.
they're real and they're spectacular.
And I got to disagree. I think it'd be a good thing, you mentioned, if the Canadian teams all came together and buddied up and had a few
whatever.
brews. Come on. Why is this huge thing? Like, why
It's
do sports,
fun.
Why
It's
do
fun.
It's not fun. People get really angry about sports, and I don't think it's a bad thing for us to all hang out and be buddies.
Let me say this:
I grew up.
I've not been able to stand the Vancouver Canucks ever, but I
who
absolutely
cares?
I love Quinn Hughes, their defenseman, so I can
Oh,
cheer
yeah.
for Quinn. Obviously, we'd love to see the Oilers do well. I've got a soft spot. I've always felt like Winnipeg Jets fans kind of got screwed over for they've been screwed over
Everything.
multiple times, but they had great teams in the 80s, and they just, if it wasn't the Oilers, it was the Flames, and so the Jets never were able to win, and then of course they lost their team in a game. So the Jets are looking good against Colorado last night, 7-6. The Leafs,
Quinn Hughes very emotional in the game Vancouver last night. Like he
Yeah.
was overloaded on the. I don't know if you watched the game, but a big
did.
comeback for them.
Yeah.
And the crowd was absolutely incredible. But like, I grew up in Ontario, so I watched the Leafs. I lived in Vancouver for 7 years. I went to a bunch of Canucks games. I was there for the Riot game. That was insane. And now I'm here. I'll say this. I love the Edmonton Oilers. They are my number one team. But I like the Leafs. I like watching them. I like watching the Canucks when they're on. The only team I'd say I don't generally like that's Canadian would probably be the Flames. But even then, the day after the playoffs, when the Oilers are eliminated, like they have been every time since I've lived in the city, I've never seen them win a cup, obviously. I am emotionally, I'm fine, right? But a lot of people, they get real angry. Would I be better the next day if they win the Stanley Cup? Of course, it's party time.
Yeah, it's party
But I
time.
try not to let sports affect me like that. So I feel like if people got along a little more, I'm not saying you got to throw on a Canucks jersey if they go to the final, but have a beer, watch the game. Who cares?
Yeah, we'll see who they're playing. And I don't think you're going to have to worry about the Flames for a while. I wanted to address a couple of things in the chat. I saw Justin invoked "for shame." Anytime I see the word shame,
For
Justin
shame
says
for
"for
what?
shame" because he says your dishwasher could have been sent to the eco station. Not that, dude. I don't know where it went.
That's true.
But this is the out of sight, out of mind thing. This is just real life as well, dude. When they drop the new one off, you pay $40 and they take the old one. I'm assuming they take it to the eco station. But again, I don't think I'm out of where the average consumer is,
No.
and that I am not hauling my dishwasher to wait in line for an hour and a half at the Eco Station with, like, I'm just sorry.
Well, that's part of the thing. You want convenience. But, dude, we do so much recycling, and it
do a
was
lot of
crazy for him to say that. And I've heard other people, scholars, say that too. Most of the crap you're sending to the recycle place, if you're not cleaning it properly, some things you think, like the wrapper on a cucumber, whatever, half of the stuff we spend all this time putting in the recycle bin, taking out, doesn't even make it to get recycled.
And I'm not trying to give everybody a pass because it's Earth Day, and we should. Like, honestly, let's all today, and I don't want to call myself a hero, you guys, but I did notice as the family was having breakfast this morning, our little baby bear, his bedroom light was still on while he was downstairs. And I don't want to call myself a hero, but I did step into his bedroom and turn the light off because nobody was in the room. And so you're welcome, Planet Earth. You're welcome.
But that's discouraging to hear
you know
that
what?
Put in all that work and then it just goes in the garbage.
And I've heard somebody say this to me once, and it's not profound. As a matter of fact, it may be the opposite of it, but it's true. And somebody said, I asked this guy, I said, are you pretty diligent in recycling? He goes, man, you can't put like plastic food, you can't put, plastic waste into the recycling if there's like food on it, if there's specks on it. And I go, yeah. And he goes, so you want me to use fresh water? You want me to use all this water to wash all my plastic so we can recycle it? He's like, does anybody ever think about how, and I kind of went, it does sound like a bit of a way to get out of your responsibility.
Sure.
But like, he's not wrong.
Of course,
he's not wrong. Like how much water do we now people are going to write in all angry, but I'm just saying, like, this is how real people think. Like, how much water do we want to use to wash our plastic? Waste, you know.
And it's
what I'm
hard
saying?
because all the things that stain or get on plastic where you'd have to wash it like that, like food stuff, everything's capped with plastic. Even if it's not in plastic, you open it, there's a plastic seal. So, but we take every one of those and we wash them and we put them, and you're right, we're wasting water at the same time.
I like this from Vamp Fashions, who's in the chat, says it should be illegal to export garbage. But then again, in the third world, they do have engineers that create solutions. There's a woman in India that says that they built a factory from shred, wash, melt, and extrude bag waste.
Wow.
Interesting. I was telling you guys that we put artificial turf in our backyard and made out of, we were told maybe they're bullshitting us, I don't know, but they told us it was made out of recycled plastic bottles.
We need more of that.
That's pretty cool, right?
And isn't it crazy how the people like India, it's always when it's in your backyard, then you come up with amazing ideas. We're kind of like, we don't see as much plastic as we should in our waters in and around Canada. We see some. But places like India, China, all these places, like you saw the video we were showing here today.
Yeah.
Like, it's absolutely, imagine when all the oceans are just like that. They're showing all the floating garbage patches now. It used to be just the one big one. Now we've got 3. It's a little downer for Earth Day, but I'm glad you're opening your eyes.
Yeah, and I'm trying to research something on the fly here because I see people talking about water and how important that is. Don't forget, about a month ago, as a matter of fact, Johnny, this was like my favorite thumbnail that you've made in a long time. It was March 21st, our episode. You remember this one? Water Wars, we called it. And we were talking about just basically the different research that's happening around water, some of the implications of that. I'll link to that in our chat, or rather in our show notes on YouTube and in the podcast. It feels like a good day to go back and watch the fight for our most valuable natural resource, that is water wars. You can let us know where you're landing on this. I'll reference before we wrap, there's a bunch of people in the chat saying the Eco Station, the Eco Center doesn't take 90 minutes to wait in line. It takes 5 minutes. Okay, guys, you get it. I'm just saying, like, the average person, if the installer offers dishwasher pickup and drop off, they're not doing it themselves. That's the average person. Shout out to those of you that have the time and the pickup trucks to do it. I encourage all of you to do everything you can to lessen your environmental footprint. If we didn't care about it deeply, we wouldn't be doing special edition shows like this one today. And our thanks to Dr. Batnagar. That guy was just a beauty, eh?
Yeah, he's amazing.
Yeah.
Awesome.
He's always like, it's not me, it's the microbes. Well, I think it might be a little bit you, buddy. We're going to wrap today's show with yet more optimism and positivity. It is a weekly tradition presented by our friends at Kubi Renewable Energy. Positive reflections. No mistake. It's not an accident that this happens the first day of every week, because we kind of know you got a case of the Mondays, not with positive reflections. We're harnessing positive energy, renewing faith in humanity, and I wanted to give a shout out to everybody that was involved in the Hope gala over the weekend in beautiful Fort Saskatchewan. The room was full on Saturday night, a sellout crowd, including a bunch of Real Talkers that were out there because you heard about this on the show. That's the Andy Polanski Charitable Foundation. Andy passed away tragically about 12 years ago, 24 years of age, in an auto accident. But the guy, you get this, Johnny, he was already like the president of this association, the head coach of that. He was already a huge community contributor at just 24 years of age. And so his family and friends have established that Evening of Hope on Saturday night and a whole bunch of other things. They built a $500,000 playground out in Fort Saskatchewan. And now they're providing financial supports for organ donor families.
Amazing.
Organ donation, that is one way that Andy's legacy continues. We heard the remarkable story amid tragedy, obviously, but how Andy, because he was an organ donor, was able to preserve, extend life for other people. And what we don't think about is these organ donor families, people that have lost loved ones. They're in that grieving stage, but they don't have the financial supports to be able to stay in the city at the hospital while their loved one is on life support, while the organs, all the stuff we don't think about, right? And so the amazing people behind the Andy Polanski Charitable Foundation, you can check it out at apcf.ca. I've already signed on to do next year's event. We had so much fun. The live auction was wild.
Yeah, if anyone's interested, Ryan is now a licensed auctioneer.
Oh, don't spread rumors. Don't spread rumors. But we can't wait already for next year. And I wanted to give a shout out, not just to the folks of Fort Saskatchewan, not just to the people behind the Andy Polanski Charitable Foundation, but to the Real Talkers that showed up, including a guy by the name of AJ. I'd never met AJ before. He comes up to me, introduces himself as a Real Talker. He said, if we say Real Talk RJ, you'll buy us a beer. I said, AJ, to the bar. And so AJ and his wife and I hung out at the bar, and I asked him a little bit about what prompted him to drive out to Fort Saskatchewan. He doesn't live there. They made the trip. They actually canceled other plans to attend. And he said, well, number one, we wanted to support Real Talk. He said, number two, he says, I just had my second kidney transplant in September. Geez. So he was diagnosed with kidney failure when he was 17, 18 years old. He had a transplant when he was 21. It lasted, it served him well for about 17 years, and then he started to go into kidney failure again. So he was on dialysis. He's telling me about this journey, just a brutal experience. And then luckily he was able to get a new kidney just this past fall. And he said that the uptake's been amazing. You can see the relief on his wife's face, just absolutely amazing. But it reiterated to me, Johnny, the conversations that we have on this show, the causes that we support, it's because of you guys and that community. And by the end of our conversation, like AJ and I are hugging and we're going to hang out. We're new buddies. And my heart was full. Awesome. My heart was just overflowing. So AJ, thanks to you for being there. Thanks to the other Real Talkers that came up and said hi. And thanks to all of you that have signed your donor cards. You can do it at a registry. Let your family know your end-of-life wishes. It's an awkward, or it feels like maybe sometimes a strange conversation, but it's so important that we preserve and protect life when and where we can. Thank you for being an organ donor. AJ, thanks for coming. Thanks to everybody who supported the Andy Polanski Charitable Foundation, and thanks to our friends at Kubi Renewable Energy for giving us the opportunity to focus on the positives each and every Monday right here on Real Talk. You can send us your positive reflection to talk@ryanjesperson.com. Coming up on Tuesday's episode, that's April 23rd, Grand Prairie's Mayor Jackie Clayton's going to join me in studio. They've said goodbye to the RCMP. They're swearing in their new municipal police chief. We're going to talk about that. And on Wednesday, we're going to talk to a Canadian journalist that was over in the Middle East writing for The New Yorker. She's going to give us her first-hand, front-line perspective on that Israel-Hamas war. We'll talk to you soon.
Real Talk is hosted by Ryan Jesperson. Executive producer Josh Dunford. Technical producer John Hick.